Have you ever put off replying to an email or text or procrastinated on starting an essay because it just felt too overwhelming? Well, you're not alone. In this video, I'll share a step-by-step framework from my experience as a published author, academic coach, and sales trainer designed to enhance your writing and communication skills powerfully in just 7 days. The first step in this process is defining our big idea. This is your North Star in any writing. It's your thesis in an essay, the solution your product offers in an ad, or the key proposal in your email and text. Let's focus on finding and clarifying your big idea. Before I became the author of a 300+ page academic text, I started out struggling with this concept as a high school freshman. I was so confident when I handed in the first essay I had ever written for English class, only to have the professor pull me aside a few days later to discuss his concerns about the failing grade I received. It turned out I had a lot of great ideas, but just no central idea. But how can you clarify for yourself what you want to communicate? Let's be honest, sometimes it's hard to know exactly what we want to get across, and that was my struggle too. It was as if I had a beautiful image somewhere in my mind, but it existed only as a jumbled mess of puzzle pieces. Well, you might have heard a tip out there that you should sit quietly and simply write out whatever comes to your mind until you start to figure out your best ideas. This can help, but this is kind of like dumping that mess of puzzle pieces onto a table, moving them around a bit, and trying to guess at what the final image is supposed to be like. Wouldn't it be easier to just have an actual strategy for how to put those pieces together? While just writing our thoughts and whatever comes to us can be useful, there's a simple method of outlining for writing I started to use in my last years of high school that took my essays from low B's to A's and A+. And that is to think of every written communication, whether that's an essay or a work email, as a three-layered structure. Main point, followed by supporting detail, which is just the detail that supports the main point, followed by evidence. When we begin writing, we often have several thoughts in our mind that we want to communicate in, let's say, a work email we're working on. Similar to that jumbled mess of puzzle pieces, we have an overwhelming list of ideas we want to express. It's not a beautiful picture yet, but it will be. Just think about how you'd put that puzzle together. Would you start with the middle pieces first, or would you start with the edges, since they're a little bit more easily recognizable? Well, just like it's way more challenging to start putting together all those middle pieces first, it's pretty hard to try to figure out our big idea first too. And that might be where you're getting stuck, sitting there endlessly asking yourself, what's the main point I want to make? Instead, let's work on putting together the edges of the puzzle first. Ask yourself, what's at least one very important idea I want to communicate? This is often a much easier question to answer. Let's say one of those important ideas is the new rules have led to decreases in productivity. Well, let's put that in our supporting detail category for now. Now let's ask ourselves what evidence we can use among our idea pile. Customer satisfaction is down 35%. Seems like a reasonable piece of evidence here to support this statement. We've successfully connected a few end pieces now, so here's where we can start to fill in the middle of our puzzle, which is our big idea. For this, let's simply ask ourselves, is the supporting detail we chose the specific one we want to communicate, or does it fall under another idea on our list? Well, it seems to fall under the statement, deadlines for recent projects are unreasonable, since here, that's the policy we're referring to, so now we choose this statement as our big idea. Because we worked backwards, we were able to gradually see our main idea taking shape. This process sifts out the relevant information and leaves us with a structure we can now use to form the rest of our essay, email, text, or even our ad. By the time I got to college, I started to master this process so well that I began tutoring other students on it. This simple reframing of my writing process brought me a long way from that struggling high school freshman, but it wasn't the only key to my improvement. It was these next two steps that enabled me to publish my first peer-reviewed academic text at 23 years old. So if you skip these steps, it might just be the reason you continue to struggle. After we discover our big idea, we need to move on to step 2, persuasion techniques. Have you ever gotten a cold call from a salesperson, or even gotten yelled at by a coworker or her parent and felt even less desire to buy that product or comply with their request. A wall went right up between you and that person, didn't it? Well, that's because the communication you received from these people was inherently unpersuasive. In the famous work Rhetoric by the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle, Aristotle outlines 3 techniques for making an effective argument. These are logos, pathos, and ethos. If you're writing an academic essay, logos will be your best friend here. Logos is the use of facts, logic, or statistics to ground our claims. For example, in the work email we wrote together, the statement customer satisfaction is down 35% would be a perfect example of that. The best academic essays, and this is my opinion here, but I think I'm right, contain only facts, logic, and statistics. Why? Consider our audience. If it's a scientific or analytical paper, our readers will consider anything other than facts, logic, or statistics to be simply fluff. On the other hand, if you're writing sales copy, crafting a text, or writing a work email, we should totally reverse this. Here, your best friends will be ethos and pathos. Ethos is the use of authority figures or other people's stories, and pathos is the use of emotion. Let's see how we could spruce up our work email with these techniques. The phrase deadlines for recent projects are unreasonable feels a little bit like an accusation, which remember might cause someone to put their walls up. How about using a little pathos here? Let's add it to this line. Deadlines for recent projects have recently caused me and many of our coworkers to feel overwhelmed. See how that instantly starts to create more relatability and brings down any potential walls? Now, in an essay, you can use this too if, let's say, the essay isn't purely academic. Let's say you're trying to argue for a specific policy. Instead of discussing only the facts about not having affordable housing, for example, discuss a specific case of a family becoming homeless and the specific struggles they go through in order to support your argument. How about using ethos? Let's try it again with our work email example. Let's change the new rules have led to decreases in productivity to the team lead at XYZ company tried implementing tighter deadlines in the past, but then changed the policy after he saw decreases in productivity. See how we used some third-party credibility here? Edit the line following that to match it a bit, and now you have a much better piece of writing. How can you use ethos in your essay writing? Taking that previous affordable housing policy discussion as an example, you might add a statement by a prominent nonprofit or government agency that works in this area, or you might add in an admission that supports your argument made by the opponents of the policy. But let's be honest, this writing is still a bit dry and unconvincing. But why? Because it's still lacking our third and final step in this writing process, which is to add a hook and storytelling. By now, you might be noticing where you're getting stuck in the writing process. You might be doing these steps out of order, trying to find the main idea first before you've collected evidence and supporting details, trying to add persuasion techniques before even coming up with any of those 3 elements. It's so crucial for taking the stress off of yourself to start with those first steps and build each layer on top of the other until you get to this crucial third step. Think of a hook as the first bite of a chocolate bar. Your first sentence should make your reader crave more instead of just leaving them with a sugar rush. There are lots of ways to craft hooks, from asking an open-ended question, to stating something polarizing, to suggesting something counterintuitive. Don't get overwhelmed with this. Just keep trying out different hooks and ask others to tell you whether the sentence you created makes them want to keep reading. In academic essays, we don't need hooks. Again, my very controversial, but I think correct opinion here. If your professor told you need a hook to start your essay out, they're wrong. But respectfully, if your professor insists, then you'll get what you need from this step. Let's add an intriguing hook to our work email example. Because it's a professional communication, let's try the sentence, as our team lead, I'm very grateful for all the hard work you put in here, and it seems there's an area in which we can make progress together. Remember, we want to bring the walls down, and adding a compliment or validation itself can be an effective hook. In an academic essay, again, let's say about affordable housing, we might start with hooks similar to the ones listed here. Okay, so then how about storytelling? We're biologically wired to relate better to stories and also respond better to them as readers. So how can we integrate this into our work email, for example? Let's not force it, but instead let's try to weave it in. In our second sentence, we can simply add an example. Let's add, hitting my deadline last week, for example, made me unable to give enough time to the customer, which I could tell upset her. We could even end the email with a happy ending. By implementing the changes seen at XYZ company, they were able to double their customer satisfaction within the following quarter. As for academic essays, there isn't really any storytelling we can or should be doing, but that doesn't mean in the spirit of storytelling, we can't make impactful statements in our concluding paragraphs. Even in scientific papers, which are the last place you would expect to see storytelling, researchers often discuss the potential implications of their research, which is arguably a reflection of the scientist's creative imagination. Remember, your words are powerful, so learn to use them powerfully. If you want to keep leveling up your critical thinking, then be sure to watch this next video.